again, everyone. Welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm your host, John, and today, pretty cool topic, so let's get to it. What is the weirdest or creepiest thing that you or someone you know has ever experienced with a telephone or mobile phone? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Mom died years ago. Dad got a phone call from her. My mom died 13 years ago. About 4 years ago, my dad was on vacation in Arizona with his girlfriend. He said he was up watching TV, and the hotel phone rang. He answered it and said it was my mom's voice saying, "I'm okay." He said, "Cass?" And he said the phone was crackly and said, "Tell Heather, me, I'm okay." He said his girlfriend was confused why the phone rang. He immediately called me, even though it was late, and he was crying. My dad doesn't believe in the supernatural, but still to this day can't explain that call. My husband and I had gone shopping, and when we pulled in our driveway, a sheriff was there, and we asked if we could help him. He asked if anyone was in there, meaning in the house, and my husband said there better not be. We checked the house, and nobody was in there, but while we were looking, the sheriff told us our phone number had called 911 several times and hung up, so he was sent to check it out. When I was 8 years old, I had a dream that my grandmother, several states away, had called. In the dream, it was daytime, and I was on the phone in my parents' bedroom. I knew she needed my help, but the line kept cutting out. All I could hear was her saying she couldn't hear me, while I was saying the same to her. In the morning, I told my mom, but she shrugged it off. It was just a dream. My grandmother then calls and tells my mom that I had called her last night, but she couldn't hear me very well. She thought I needed her help, and she wanted to know if everything was okay. The calls never showed up on the long-distance bill. Everyone was fine, but there was never a good explanation of what happened or why. You all know what happened on September 11th in 2001. That time, I was at school and had a Nokia cell phone. After the second tower fell, I've gotten 2 voicemails. It did not ring, just the voicemails. One was a big sound and then silence. The other one was someone saying goodbye. This is strange because I live in Brazil, never been in the US and never had someone there. I still believe it was someone who got trapped and died there. I still think about it. Super late to the party, but I'll share. My grandpa died when I was 9. We called him a very unique name for grandpa that is actually a different language, his native language. He had a sister, my great aunt, who was much older than him and who was still living at the time of his death. She was in her mid-90s. Still lived at home by herself, and was very active for her age. This takes place in the late 90s, when dial-up internet was all that was available in our area. We had a separate phone line for the internet. My siblings and I were home alone while our parents were at work. We had this massive pitty, who was an absolute baby to us, but super protective over us kids. We lived literally in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by woods and farms. This was about a month or so since my grandpa passed away. I was messing around on the internet, but kept getting kicked offline. No one had the phone line number. We didn't even know the number. Suddenly, our dog starts to lose his shit outside, barking, growling, snarling, just completely out of his mind angry. But no one was there. At the same time, the internet disconnected again, and that phone started ringing. After several minutes, I answered it. The following conversation happened. Horrible static the entire time. Me. Hello? Caller. Hi, worthless commotion. Me. Who is this? Caller. It's your grandpa, in foreign language with pronunciation correct. Me. Hi? At this point, dog is still going wild. I'm freaking out. Caller. Tell your mom to check on Aunt blank. Me. Oh, okay. I love you, grandpa. Caller. I love you, worthless commotion. Line goes dead. I immediately call my mom at work and tell her exactly what just happened. She's still grieving the loss of her dad and kind of brushes it off. A few days later, my aunt's neighbor, who checks in on her, called my mom to let her know that my aunt had fallen in her home and had been on the floor with a broken hip for several days. How many days? Exactly since the day my grandpa called and told us to check on her. I'm not one to comment on people's skepticism, and I understand that, but if someone said, "Hey, I had this weird experience happen, and they told me to check on that woman," I would check on that woman. So, come on. My cell phone in college was possessed. One night, I had it in my pocket, charger hole up, and a girl tripped and spilled her entire vodka soda basically right in the hole. Starting that night around 3:30 a.m., my phone began doing what it would do every night for a year until I turned it off for good. Call 1 to 3 random people from my contacts. It would do it through the voice command feature, super creepy, and always between 2:30 and 4:30, exclusively, almost every single night. I rarely woke up to its announcement, boop boop, calling Ryan, to end the call, so every morning I'd get a look at my call history and see who I'd embarrassed myself by calling. It was always someone embarrassing who wouldn't believe I called by accident, like someone I dated. And my phone did more than this. During the day, since it wasn't calling people, it would at random start blasting music. Not just any music though, always the same song, Miss Murder by AFI. Sometimes it would happen multiple times a day, most days not at all or just once, but only Miss Murder and only during the day. Toward the end of my phone's life before being decommissioned, I would periodically be on a phone call and have my conversation partner's voice replaced with static. Then the static would start warping, and then about half the time, it would become full-blown demonic talking, like super deep voice, warped and impossible to understand. Classic satanic-sounding shit. Finally, enough was enough. I had the money for a new phone. This had gone on for about a year by now. It was an everyday part of my life, and it was extremely annoying. I came home with my new phone and put my old phone on my desk. I opened my contacts on my laptop. I had a Mac and both phones were iPhones, and started manually putting my most important contacts in. There was a 0% chance I was going to use any kind of backup of my old phone's data. It was not worth the risk. Wouldn't you know, my old phone had to pull one last annoying trick. This bitch starts playing a new song other than Miss Murder for the first time ever, and the song is the miserable self-pitying ass This Is How It Goes by Amy Mann. For those who don't know, it starts, "This is how it goes, you get angry at yourself." I was furious. In that moment I truly felt my phone was sentient, and I was so mad for every time it ever effed with me. It must have played Miss Murder 100 times, no joke. I said F you, and turned it off for good. Dialing old crushes in the middle of the night, singing its favorite song at inappropriate times, speaking emphatically but unintelligibly. I guess my only theory as to what could have happened is that my phone had one vodka soda and got permanently drunk. Not as spooky as some of these comments, but back in middle school when the movie The Ring had just come out, I was watching it at my best friend's house. We always watched movies in the creepy-ass basement downstairs that gave me the creeps on a normal day. We were sitting in the dark and just saw the scene in the movie where the creepy, haunted tape is played and the phone starts to ring in the movie. At the exact same time, her phone rang. If you haven't seen the movie, the phone rings and on the other end of the line is a terrifying girl's voice that says, 7 days, meaning you have 7 days until you die. I made her answer the phone, her house, her phone. It was her brother's friend. He wasn't in the house and had no idea what we were doing, so it was just a super creepy coincidence. My friend called me in a panic once, and when I picked up, they asked if I was safe, if I'm by myself, etc., and sounded pretty worked up. I asked what was wrong, and they said someone had called them using my number, but it was an older man saying really strange, incomprehensible things about how I was unsafe, and that they needed to pay for my safety. Apparently it was some sort of common scam, but still it shook me up. The strangest, most inexplicable thing that's ever happened to me happened only a few months ago. I was briefly working at a job at a college bookstore, where one of my tasks was to call customers that had ordered books that were out of stock and let them know we had received their books. I'd already called a large number of customers that day and was in the groove of it. I had the process figured out. You either called and got an answer where you had a script to tell them about their book, or you got the answering machine and had a slightly different script to give. Simple enough. Until I called one number and got neither, just silence. It threw me off a little, and I just hung up after a few seconds. I called back again. This time, I heard what sounded like someone picking up and quietly listening, but for some reason, I held my tongue and just listened too. I could hear sounds, like people faintly talking in the background. Then I heard a quiet, "Hey, how can I help you today?" A man responded something along the lines of, "I need to pick up my book." I was confused for a split second until my coworker standing near me behind our desk suddenly says, "Hey, how can I help you today?" She's speaking to a customer, a man, who tells her, "I need to pick up a book." Suddenly I get goosebumps. I listen for a few moments more. On the line I hear their conversation, but about a second before it happens, I hang up, walk out from behind the desk and say to my coworkers, "I'm going on my break." My break consisted largely of me sitting at a table outside and silently wondering what had happened. I didn't do phone calls for the rest of the day and never told any of my coworkers. TL, DR, I may have seen into the future, but by only about a second. Well, you should have written that phone number down, saved it, and called it all the time. Or could it have been maybe your coworker's phone and there was a delay? Thoughts? This happened years ago, and I still think about it a lot. I was up late one night on my computer. I was just doing my accounts. I'd been on for hours. The second I turned my computer off, my mobile rang. This was very odd as it was about 3 a.m. I can't remember now if it was caller withheld or not, but it wasn't any number I recognized. I answered it though, as my boyfriend at the time was working night shifts and I thought it might be him on a work number or something. When I answered, I was hit by the strangest noise I've ever heard. It sounded like laughter, like a witch doing an evil cackling, except it had what I can only describe as an electrical quality. Not robotic, but mechanical, I guess. Almost like the sound you used to get when your router was connecting. Along with the laughter, it descended into some sort of gibberish talking. The closest thing I've heard to it is a Sierra sound Bigfoot recording. Except again, this part sounded like a mechanical human-type voice. I still can't explain it. The fact I was called the second my computer went off was frightening to me as well. One time, a landline scared the shit out of me. My friend and I every summer would always spend a weekend or two alone at her family's vacation house in Maryland, but they didn't use the house much, and it was still a time capsule from the 1970s when it was last furnished with old appliances, shag carpeting, and retro furniture. Her mom had inherited it and hadn't done much with it. There was an old landline phone on the wall in the kitchen, which I was told didn't work, didn't have a number, and wasn't connected to anything. We couldn't even use it to order pizza, had to use our cell phones. Well, one night we got super high, and I guess I fell asleep on the couch because that's where I woke up at 3:21 a.m. to the sound of that landline ringing. I was already so disoriented from waking up on the couch with my friend nowhere in sight in this creepy-ass dark house. The phone was too much, but it kept ringing and ringing. It wouldn't stop. So I ran into the kitchen and unplugged it completely from the wall. Now it was sitting, silent, attached to nothing, on the kitchen counter. Because the house was so creepy and dark, and I was freaked out, I didn't want to go navigating the hallways to my dark room, which was the creepiest and darkest room in the house. So, since the living room got the most moonlight from outside, I figured I would just stay out there. Not 5 minutes after I laid back down, the phone rang again. I almost shat myself. I took off straight into my friend's room so I wouldn't have to pass the kitchen again and insisted on sleeping in there with her. I'm getting scared again just thinking about it. Like 20 years ago, I was living alone in my first apartment. One morning I woke up to my alarm going off, and like 1 second after my cell phone rang, my landline phone rang, and my computer turned itself on, all at the exact same time. I just sat there in my bed, fumbling after my phone for a second, and then both phones stopped ringing. Computer stayed on though, and I shut off my alarm. No missed call on my phone. I wrote it off like some weird circumstance with a power surge involved or whatever, but the more I think of it, I can't explain it. I was at a friend's house in the mid-90s, both about 12 years old. Someone called asking for me by name, which isn't very common. When I picked up the phone, the person had hung up. When we called back on speakerphone, the person said that they realized they had misdialed. Just a weird coincidence that I happened to be there, I guess. I had been on an early shift, up at 2 a.m., home at 1 p.m., and when I got in, I crashed on the sofa with phone next to me on the sofa. I had not been upstairs yet at this point. About an hour later, I woke up and reached for my phone, but it wasn't there. I looked all around and couldn't find it. Thought I had knocked it off of the floor or something. Wasn't there. Wasn't under the cushions or under the sofa. So I grabbed my laptop and did the find my phone and had it ring. I could hear it upstairs in my bedroom. It was coming from my bed, but it took me a while to realize that it was inside the duvet cover at the opposite end. It was as if someone had opened up the end of the duvet cover, thrown it all the way to the pillow end, then fastened the cover back up. I'm not a sleepwalker, and it was only an hour. I had a sore arm from being in the same position when I woke up on the sofa. Oh, important to add, I live alone. About 3 years ago, I got a call from an unknown number. I don't answer unknown numbers, so I let it go to voicemail. I listened, and it was a slow, quiet pop kind of sound with no lyrics and someone talking in Chinese or Japanese. It wasn't singing, it was more like they were listing off a bunch of things. The same thing happened a couple of hours later, and I'm sure it was the exact same part of the song and speech that it was before. But whatever, I thought nothing of it and put it out of my mind. A few days later, I got called by an unknown number, and I decided to answer. And it was exactly the same as it was the last 2 times. I'm sure there's a perfectly rational explanation, but it was just so bizarre and random. I don't know if the person who wrote this actually, when they answered the call, was it a voice or a recording? Because I've received some robo-dial voicemails of people yelling at me in an Asian dialect, and I'm just like, they're just checking on their car's extended warranty. One time, my boyfriend and I were driving home from a trip we went on. I was driving, and it popped up on my car screen that my boyfriend was getting a call from his dad. He pulled out his phone, and the phone screen very clearly had my dad's full name, saying it was a Facebook Messenger call. My boyfriend and I stared at it for a good second before he answered it, and it was in fact his dad calling, not mine. I got slightly distracted by this because of how weird it was, and when I looked up, I was just in time to slam the brakes, or I would have hit the car in front of us that was taking a left going 55 miles an hour. Still freaks me out when I think about it, lol. I have no idea how a call from another phone number came up as a Facebook Messenger call, let alone it saying my dad's name when it was his dad. So strange. I worked at a chain family restaurant in the early 2000s. A few times a year, we'd get this creep calling. There was no predictability to it, and the phone was at the host stand, so almost always a 16 or 17-year-old girl would get this call. The guy would be giggling a bit and be all, "Oh my god, you won't believe what just happened, it's so embarrassing." The phone answerer would typically assume it was a coworker and try to figure out who it was. The guy would start breathing heavy and semi-answer the questions the host would be asking to try to figure out who the caller was. It would only take a minute or so, and then the guy would make noises as if he was coming, and then say, "I just got caught masturbating in public," and hang up. Poor hosts were always so shaken up. The calls always came from unlisted numbers. Police said there was nothing they could do. It eventually became a part of training that if you answer the phone and the person says, "Oh my god, you won't believe what just happened, it's so embarrassing," to hang the F up immediately. There were about 2 years of folks immediately hanging up before he seemingly stopped. I was there for 7 years, and he didn't call once in my final 2 years.